Hey everybody, welcome to part one of this week's lecture on Robert Arneson. And the first one's called Robert Arneson's Influences, and the second one is about his work specifically. Why Robert Arneson, and yeah, I mean, he is the main character that will be weaving through our entire unit on funk, because he's considered probably one of the founding fathers or founding persons of the funk movement in Northern California, specifically in Clay. And what does that mean, funk and all that kind of stuff? Well, we're going to delve into that. I mean, how does something get a name like that, and how does it develop? What's interesting about him from our perspective is that he's a homie. He was born in Benicia and he died in Benicia. He went to Benicia High School right over the bridge. He was the cartoonist there for the local paper. He went to Marin, College of Marin. He got his undergraduate at California College of Arts and Crafts and his MFA from Mills. He taught high school here. He taught high school at Fremont High. He taught at Santa Rosa Junior College. Sister college of very similar colleges as DVC, and he also taught a little bit at Mills College. But his main focus in life as a working person, was to teach at UC Davis in the art faculty for close to 40 years. So, close to 30 years. It's like 29 years, something like that. Anyways, he profoundly has affected me, and he's profoundly affected a lot of people. And so this talk is about, so what were his influences? And you're going to know so much about him, and you're going to see all his work. This talk is about, so how did he come to be, to make the things that he made, right? So it's basically about his influences. So what we're going to do in this next 10 minutes is go back over the history of art that led up to him, and realize, who are the people that truly had an impact on him, even if he never met him, the people that just really, their ideas were important to him. Marcel Duchamp is probably one of the most important people in the modern art movement, as far as a person his work was not only when he wanted it to be, was beautiful and had a lot to do with ideas. He was one of the founders of Cubism, together with Picasso and others, Braque, but he was also a very conceptual artist who thumbed his nose at tradition and traditional notions of art. And for example, here he was all about what are the ideas behind art. This says, this is not a pipe. He liked to play with words too. Of course, he was French, but he was a conceptual artist. He wasn't concerned about something being beautiful. He considered that to be what he called retinal art. He wanted art to have to do with ideas. He wanted it to make you think first and foremost. That to him was beautiful. He was looking for the beautiful idea as opposed to the beautiful object. That's Marcel Duchamp, and he still has dramatic effects on everyone making art today, because you might look at stuff like this. It's called a ready-made. He took stuff that he found and put it together, and the notion was, because I have put this back together, it is a new creation. It is something new, and because I'm representing it to you as the artist, you're sort of obliged to take it seriously as a new thing. And I'm calling it art. And so he did this dramatically, like taking toilets and putting them up and, in saying that's art. All of these things, you might not think they're beautiful, but the ideas they represent are important. And he, as a person, was important. And he definitely had a big effect on Robert Arneson. Bob, let's just call him Bob. That's what everybody called him. Anyways, but Marcel Duchamp ended his life really pretty much taking up chess and stuff. He was quite the intellectual guy, and you'll see him throughout art history. Also, a big influence on Arneson was Picasso, and Picasso's attraction to beautiful women, but also his interest in abstraction. He was one of the founders of Cubism, together with Marcel Duchamp, but also, I think, mostly using all of that, Picasso had a lot of political notions that he addressed obliquely, but this is probably the most dramatic one, Guernica, right? And also, towards the end of his life, he did a ton of ceramics. People don't know that, but Picasso did probably, as many ceramic pieces as he did many paintings and stuff because he was so prolific in working. He made a bazillion ceramic pieces. Anyways, also a big influence on Arneson was abstract expressionism. He didn't necessarily agree with all the tenets of abstract expressionism. He actually revolted against them, but a big hero of his was Jackson Pollock, and Jackson Pollock's ferocity at, attacking canvases and the whole drip and drool, rip and tear school of applying an image. And also other artists who had the same feel, like Franz Klein, who we've talked about before, whose work is just incredibly visceral and physical, right? And of course, Peter Volkos, who was also a person who lived in the Bay Area and someone that Arneson knew and respected his work and even emulated it in many ways. Others that were abstract expressionists in completely different veins were Mark Rothko, right? Whose work was very cerebral. His work was about contemplation. It was about it wasn't about rip and tear, drip and drool. It was about finding a place for contemplation, like I said. Also, Willem de Kooning, whose work was, how do you say it? He was along the lines of Pollock and many of the others, as far as being very, aggressive, but he never completely gave up the figure. You can see them hiding there in the images, right? Someone else whose work also along the same line of modernists and abstract expressionists was Niki Sedamfa. And her work had to do with abstract expression, but it edged into pop. And when I say it edged into pop, you see objects and you see things from popular culture. And you see things that you recognize, right? And you see comics and things that might be from popular culture. And those were things that Arneson really gravitated towards. So these were all brewing. They were in the air. They were in the world. And I think they had an effect on him. But what really tipped the scale was pop art. And the main figure in pop art, of course, was Andy Warhol. And here is this really iconic image because Andy Warhol is here. And then over here you see Marcel Duchamp, probably not long before Marcel Duchamp died. I think he died in 1968, and this was in the mid-60s. And, here's Andy Warhol as a young guy, getting going. Kind of neat. Well, Andy Warhol took things from everyday culture. He was the first person to take, maybe not the first, but the first to popularize it and really go with it. Things that you find in a grocery store, popular objects, things that define us as consumer culture, Campbell's soup cans, Brillo pads, and also the icons that we so love and adore, from Elvis to Marilyn to, why am I forgetting his name? Anyways, Michael Jackson. Anyways, and he also poked fun at art and art history. But everything, all these icons that we hold so dear, and he also edged obliquely into politics and political notions and ideas. Back in the 50s and 60s, Chairman Mao was a very important person on the world stage, and so he was making these things that had one couldn't quite figure where he was coming from in making this work. He was always attacking the intellectual, high-minded side of art and trying to show American culture who they were through what they did and what they consumed. And he's made up phrases like art is what you can get away with, or in the future everybody will be world famous for 15 minutes. That's Andy Warhol. Other people that were very similar, followed in his vein, were people like Roy Lichtenstein, who made a career out of making work out of comics and the irony of those comics depicting the Cold War and all the kind of drama going on there. He also did a lot of work in ceramics. And Edward Kleinholz, who took and tried to create sort of happenings or conceptual art by striving to bring the viewer into an actual encounter with social realities firsthand. So you actually went into a room in the state hospital, and he did this in order for you to experience the realities and dysfunctions of contemporary culture. I mean, some of his work was very profound. This piece called Sully, depicting the living spaces of our neglected elderly, for example, and their routines of intense alienation and loneliness. I mean, this has always been a moody piece to me. And this other called The Beanery, which is, kind of like the local Cheers down the road, where everybody knows your name, that kind of thing. But this was an actual place, and you walk into this place, and the music's going, and people are having conversations, and you walk around, and you can hear it. I had a chance to go in and spend, I went in several times. I probably spent a half an hour, 45 minutes in here a lot, and you can hear all the conversations and how they're sharing their temporal natures. All of them have clocks as faces, the mundane nature of everything. The only person in the whole place that didn't have a clock was the bartender, and the quirky and the comical, but also the alarmingly common bigotry, which was everywhere, from signs on the walls to things you heard people saying to each other while you were in there. Very fascinating. Also, Beatrice Woods. Here's another influence and somebody of the time. Beatrice Woods, who was a very close friend and a girlfriend of Marcel Duchamp, one of her many boyfriends. She was also the inspiration for this character in the movie of Titanic. No, she was not on the Titanic, but she was the inspiration. And she didn't touch clay until she was 45 at a community college in LA, but the rest is history. She spent the rest of her life, 60 years in Ojai, making art, and close to two people that strongly influenced her. One was Krishnamurti, who was a profound Eastern thinker that came from India and had a big effect on Western thought and ideas, and also Aldous Huxley. These were her neighbors. And you can still go see her place in Ojai. But Aldous Huxley, of course, wrote Brave New World, but he also wrote, which is considered as a dystopia, but he also wrote a utopian novel titled Island, which was written on his deathbed, which I think is his most profound work. Anyways, to say the least, Beatrice was ahead of her time. She followed her own conscience and fearlessly explored subjects in her art that were considered taboo at the time. She poked fun at just about everything in a really kind of comical, childlike way, especially our pre-established ideas about things. And in the surrealist tradition that she grew up in, being, coming of age in art in the early part of the 20th century, she investigated subconscious undercurrents and quirky and childlike responses. And just like Arnesons, she worked quickly and didn't overthink anything. Like, these kind of things that lead to the obvious, oh my, really? Oh, Beatrice, whatever. And she was fearless. She never hesitated to question power or challenge it with the appropriate resolve. So when asked her secret to longevity, she replied, art, books, chocolate, and young men. Anyways, she's one of my heroines. I've gone and seen her place and thought about her often, and really, I think she's a true heroine of the 20th century. Anyways, that is, in my opinion, many of the influences of Bob. And we will, in the next little moments here, just as soon as we're done, we will look at Bob's work. But I think it's important when you look at an artist to see where they were coming from, and what caused them to go on and make the work that they did make. Like I said, he was born and raised right here in the Bay Area, and but he was influenced by a much broader swath of artistic and intellectual concerns. And he brought it to a point here, and he strongly influenced a whole generation of artists. So we're going to take a little intermission now, and when you come back, we'll watch the artwork of Bob Arnesons. So go get a sandwich or some popcorn, and come back in just a second, start number 2, and we'll get right into it. Okay, bye for a minute.